Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. This isn't what it looks like. Honestly, coming from Sarah, who taught writing at the local college, you'd expect something a bit smarter. The room was shadowy, barely any light, and I could just make out Sarah slumped in my old armchair. Her legs were curled up, wrapped tight in a blanket. As I got closer, her hair was a mess. Her makeup was smeared all over her face, and that unmistakable sick smell hung in the air. "Let me tell you what it looks like," I said, my voice tight. "And you can tell me where I'm wrong." She started to say something, but I cut her off hard. "Shut up. I'll tell you when you can talk." Standing over her, I started to lay it out. It looks like I was walking through customs with my crew when two guys in suits flashed their badges and told me to come with them. They said they were detectives from Chicago PD and took me to some small room. I paced back and forth, trying to stay calm. The older one came in, closed the door. Just a chair in the room. He told me to sit and asked, "Where were you around noon today?" Through the crack in the blinds, I could see the younger detective questioning my team. I looked at him like he was an idiot. "You know I'm a pilot, right? Just landed from Germany. That's not exactly next door. Since I've crossed like 6 time zones today, I'm guessing you mean Chicago time." In that case, I was flying a 747 at 35,000 feet over the Atlantic. "Here's my flight log if you want to check." I opened my bag and held it out. He didn't even look, so I kept going. I had a crew of 14 and over 400 passengers who can all tell you where I was. "So what's this really about?" The younger guy came back in and said they all agreed I was flying the plane. It was amazing how fast their attitude changed when they realized they looked stupid. "Well, Captain," the older one said, "sorry for the trouble, but we're looking into a murder." "Murder?" I said, surprised. "Nobody died on my plane." "No sir, earlier today, back here in Chicago. Since I'd been in Europe for a couple of days, I figured I had a pretty solid alibi." "Yeah, so who said I killed someone?" "Your wife did." "What?" I yelled. My gut twisted. My buddy Leo was only supposed to rough the guy up, break his nose, his jaw maybe, not kill him. "What?" I said again, louder. "My wife said what?" "Who did my wife say I killed?" "Wait a minute. This has to be a joke, right?" "No joke, sir. I'm sorry to tell you this, but she said you murdered her lover." I jumped up right in his face. "Lover? You mean like a boyfriend?" He didn't back down. "Yes, sir. This isn't funny. My wife is faithful. She'd never cheat on me." "You've got the wrong guy. I was talking a mile a minute." "That's it. You must have me mixed up with someone else." "I'm sorry, Captain, but your wife said she was sure it was you. She said you beat him to death in your driveway with a baseball bat." "How?" "I was on an airplane. She knew that. She knows I was in Germany." "Explain that to me." "I'm sorry, but she said she thought you switched your flight when you found out she was having an affair." "Stop saying that," I shouted. "My wife is not having an affair. She would never break our vows." The detectives just stared, blank-faced. I guess they'd seen too much bad stuff to care. I sank back into the chair, starting to sob. "For what it's worth," the older detective said, his voice flat, "it looks like your wife got played by some smooth talker. The guy went after women whose husbands were gone a lot. Probably doesn't help, but we've got 3 other husbands in the same boat to talk to." Hearing it said out loud like that, so cold, felt like my heart was being ripped out. I doubled over in pain. One of the detectives put a hand on my back. "Captain, is there anyone I can call for you?" "I want to talk to my wife," I choked out, pounding my fist in the air. "I don't think that's a good idea right now, sir. You need to calm down." The older detective whispered something to his partner, then left the room. When he came back, he apologized and said they had to go. "Wait, before you leave." "Who was he?" The older detective pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket and flipped through it. "One Michael Lawson, 30 years old. Same age as your son, Captain. If I can ask one more thing, did he die fast, or did he suffer?" A nasty little smile flickered across his face. "His attacker lured him outside by starting his brand new sports car on fire. Lawson ran out your side door in his underwear. The first swing of the baseball bat caught him in the chest. Broke some ribs, the guy said. The next one broke his back. Then he rolled him over and kicked him a few times in the groin. Right before the car blew up, he landed the final blow to his head. Paramedics said he was still moaning and bleeding from his ears and mouth when they got there. He hung on for a couple of minutes before his heart gave out. So yeah, not a peaceful death at all." I tried not to let my smile show too much. "I should probably warn you, your wife might not be there when you get home. The house was damaged when Lawson's car exploded. Blew out all the windows on that side, and there was some fire damage." Part of me wanted to cheer. Instead, I buried my face in my hands and started wailing. The reality hit me, and I stayed in that room, unable to move, until someone from immigration knocked and said they needed the room. Somehow I found my car and drove home, or what was left of it. So now you tell me, I said to Sarah, my voice low and dangerous. What doesn't look like what it is? 1 month earlier, a quiet suburb just outside Chicago. Back in the day, there was this TV show with a busybody neighbor who always peeked through her curtains. In my neighborhood, that role belonged to old Arthur Jenkins, a widower across the street. Ever since his wife Martha died last year, Arthur spent his time watching everything. Nice days, he'd be on his porch yelling hellos. Bad weather, he'd be in his bay window waving. It was a perfect summer day, and Arthur was out there in a loud Hawaiian shirt, black shorts, and high black socks. Most people, especially my wife Sarah, avoided him because he'd talk your ear off. But since I was gone for days at a time, I appreciated him keeping an eye on the house. He was always waiting for me to get back, ready with the local gossip. I'd usually bring him back some cheap gift. German chocolates and coffee were his favorites. He stood up as I pulled into the driveway and waved me over. He looked eager to share some juicy bit of news, so I left my bags in the trunk and went across the street. That friend of yours sure has a fancy sports car, Arthur said, a knowing look on his face. Friend? What friend? The one who parked in your driveway yesterday. I figured Sarah would have told you since she invited him in. Showed up right at noon and stayed for exactly 3 hours. What did this friend look like? Good-looking fella, like out of a magazine, with those mirrored sunglasses. Nice clothes, you know? I tried to think who it could be. I was more of a classic car guy, and I couldn't picture any of my pilot buddies with a flashy sports car. And why would he have stayed so long? And why hadn't Sarah said anything? Maybe he wanted to surprise me with his ride and told her not to mention it. I was in our bedroom, unpacking, when Sarah got home from shopping. She ran up the stairs and hugged me so hard I almost fell over. How's my favorite guy? Way warmer greeting than usual, to say the least. We ended up in bed pretty quickly, and the mystery car was forgotten. The rest of the week felt like we were newlyweds. Sarah was the perfect wife. When we went out, she even wore this dress I'd bought her that she usually said was too much for her age. She even wore stockings and garters. I found out what she hadn't been wearing when she got out of the car. When I left for work the next Wednesday, I was completely satisfied. She even slipped a sweet note in my suitcase. I was the happiest guy in the sky that trip. Couldn't wait to get home. Then Arthur dropped another bomb. That friend of yours with the sports car was by again yesterday. I pressed him for details. Younger guy, he chuckled. Well, everyone's younger than me. I'd say 30, maybe 35. Good shape too. Real punctual. Got here right at noon, stayed till 3. Who the hell was this mystery visitor? I wondered. Again, Sarah got home while I was unpacking. I went downstairs and got a bear hug and a deep kiss. When we finally broke apart, Sarah announced she was making me some fancy dinner from a magazine recipe. She'd bought expensive steaks and was going to feed me like a real man. I just need to run to the store for one last thing, honey. You relax while I cook, she purred, handing me a beer. Red flags were going off in my head. In 30 years of marriage, Sarah had never handed me a beer and told me to relax when I got home from a trip. It was always a list of chores before I even took off my uniform. That little voice in my head screamed guilt. She was trying too hard. I decided to do some digging. As soon as her car left the driveway, I went outside and started going through the trash cans. Didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe empty wrappers. But it was just normal garbage. I went back inside and carefully looked through her lingerie drawer. Sarah had never given me any reason to doubt her, so snooping felt wrong. Nothing. I checked the nightstand. Same old stuff. Next, the hamper in her bathroom. Empty. Then I noticed the bedsheets were freshly washed. That was odd, since they'd been changed the morning I left. But clean sheets weren't enough to confront her. I spent a few minutes looking through her shoe boxes. Damn, that woman had a lot of shoes. No luck there either. I checked her closet, but nothing seemed new. Everything looked normal. I had to stop my investigation when I heard the front door open. Where's my favorite pilot? She called out. I decided to wait until morning to see if Sarah mentioned her secret visitor. Figured there had to be a simple explanation. I was glad I waited because she was a wildcat in bed that night. Over breakfast, I tried to bring it up casually, but she didn't say a word. I had a bad feeling in my stomach. After lunch, Sarah said she needed to go to the store for dinner stuff. I said no thanks, I needed some time alone. The second she left, I started searching again. This time in the laundry room. 2 baskets. One with Sarah's clothes. The other was empty, but I noticed a damp spot on the floor. Then I saw a small cut in the cold water hose for the washing machine. Not a big cut, but enough to leak. I hadn't done that. Why would it be cut? A few days later, I had a flight to Frankfurt. Sarah hadn't wanted to go to Paris with me a while back. She'd always talked about going. Since it was a new route for me, I didn't have the seniority to get it, but I traded with a friend. When I told Arthur I was going to Paris, his eyes lit up. He told me stories about being there during the war. His weakness was this fancy cognac he had in France. Back home, he could only afford the cheap stuff. That night at dinner, I surprised Sarah. I told her I traded my Frankfurt flight for Paris and invited her. I promised shopping, a fancy dinner at the Eiffel Tower, a boat ride on the Seine. She turned me down flat, said she was too busy. I begged her to change her plans, asked what could be so important. She just brushed me off. Things were not looking good. The rest of the week I was a zombie. Couldn't look at Sarah without feeling sick. I didn't want her touching me. She kept asking what was wrong. I never answered. The morning of my trip, I tried one last time to get her to come to Paris. Put my hands on her shoulders, looked her in the eye, begged her. Again, no. I almost told her what I suspected, but I had no proof, so I kept quiet. The last thing I did before leaving was slice that washing machine hose. Just a little. Enough to make a mess. It started spraying water everywhere. The laundry room floor sloped towards the drain, so it wasn't too bad, but Sarah would have to deal with it. I drove to the airport lost in thought, worried about flying. People's lives in my hands. I tried to push everything out of my head. My co-pilot could tell something was wrong and offered to take over. I said I felt sick and took a break in the crew rest area. Spent the next hour feeling like my insides were being ripped apart. When we landed, I apologized for being sick and said I'd stay in bed. Arthur had said the visitor always came at noon. I took a chance and called home around that time from Paris, hoping Sarah would answer or at least hear my message. The answering machine picked up on the second ring. "You've reached the Rockwell residence." I started, "Sarah, honey, I'm in the most romantic city in the world, but without you, it's like I'm in." The machine cut me off. I dialed 0 for an outside line, then our number. Kept ringing, meaning someone had turned the machine off. I just hoped hearing my voice messed with whatever they were doing. I stayed in my hotel room the whole layover. By the time I was back in the cockpit, I'd accepted that my marriage was probably over. Sarah was home when I got back, looking like a drowned rat. Without even a hello, she started yelling about the basement being flooded and everything ruined. She got mad when I said I'd look at it after I changed. I had to admit I was curious why the water hadn't gone down the drain. I put on some shorts and a t-shirt and went to the garage for my boots. First thing I saw was a laundry basket on the table. Our sheets were in there with a pair of Sarah's underwear on top. I discreetly slipped them in my pocket. Water was gushing from a broken pipe fitting, so I asked Sarah why she'd taken off the hose instead of turning off the valve. Her answer wasn't nice. I found the drain and pulled out some rags that were blocking it. The water started swirling down. I sighed and told Sarah to go upstairs and make coffee. I used that time to examine the underwear. They were stained. I almost punched a hole in the wall but stayed calm enough to look at the sheets. Big stain right in the middle. I moved the basket where it couldn't be seen easily and tried to figure out what to say while I looked through the waterlogged stuff. I grabbed a big trash bag and started shoving things in. 10 minutes later, I was taking bags of ruined stuff to the curb when Arthur called me over. "Come inside. We need to talk." This was the first time he'd ever invited me in. "I don't know an easy way to say this, but your wife has been unfaithful. When that man with the red sports car came by yesterday, I snuck across the street and peeked through your living room window. I'm sorry to tell you, but they were kissing and undressing each other. I watched until they went upstairs. My worst fears were true. Pains me to see how she's disrespected you. My friend, I'll try to put this gently. A betrayal like this can't go unpunished. I have connections to some people who operate outside the law. They owe me favors from way back. My friend, just say the word, and this worm will never bother your wife again. I swear on my grandkids, not a finger will be laid on her, but she will learn her lesson." I remember mumbling something like "thank you," but I'm afraid it's too late. Arthur looked sad. Later that evening, I remembered the fancy cognac was still in my car. I was still shaken up from our talk, wondering if he was serious. I left the bottle on Arthur's porch, rang his doorbell, and hurried back home so I wouldn't have to talk to him again. It was dark when I turned the last corner before my house. Traffic was stopped by a police car blocking the road. The officer walked over. "Sorry, sir, residents only." I pulled out my license. He looked at the address, then the name. His face changed to an awkward, embarrassed look. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rockwell." I could see people standing on their lawns, pointing at me as I drove by. A few waved. There were news trucks parked down the street and the burnt-out wreck of a sports car in my driveway, so I had to park a couple of houses down. As I got closer, a reporter spotted my uniform, and suddenly I was surrounded by people shouting questions. The loudest one kept screaming, "Did you kill him?" I held up my hand. Flashbulbs went off in my eyes. Earlier today, I was informed by the Chicago Police Department that my wife of 30 years was having an affair, and her lover was murdered in my driveway. This happened while I was flying a plane over the Atlantic Ocean. So no, I did not kill him. But I would like to thank whoever rid society of that piece of human garbage. I'd been practicing that line all the way home, hoping I'd get a chance to use it. A police officer shouted, "Let him through." I thanked him and walked through the crowd, pausing for a moment to look at the damage. Felt like a scene from a bad movie. All the windows were boarded up, and my garage was just a burnt-out shell. Thankfully, the brick walls kept the fire from spreading inside the house. I opened the door and stepped in. "So now you tell me, Sarah?" I repeated, my voice flat. "What doesn't look like what it is?" Sarah wiped her face with her sleeve. She looked like hell. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "No kidding," I shouted, the anger finally breaking through. "It was supposed to be you and me against the world." I dropped to my knees, sobbing. "You destroyed us. You destroyed our family, our life together. You destroyed everything." Sarah didn't answer, but I could hear her gasping for air. Her breathing sounded ragged. Why? I buried my face in my hands, trying to breathe. Sarah started to choke out apologies, swearing she loved me. "I don't know why. You're the only man I ever loved. I am so sorry I hurt you. I wanted to hurt her as badly as she hurt me. Did you know your little fling was married? And his wife is 9 months pregnant? Their baby will grow up without a father because of you." "Oh God, no," she screamed. "Did you know you weren't the only woman he was sleeping with? The detectives said they had several other husbands who were suspects. You were just another easy mark for him." She made this awful broken sound, like nothing I'd ever heard. "I swear, I was going to break up with him today. It was over." "You felt guilty about ruining Paris," I said, my voice cold. "You should have felt guilty for being a whore. And when exactly were you going to break up with him? After you had sex with him one last time? I know the police found him in his underwear, so don't lie to me." Sarah just moaned. "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please." A twisted thought popped into my head. If you really felt bad about missing Paris, you would have ended it before you let that maggot into our house for a goodbye fuck. If you had done that, he would have been killed somewhere else, and you would have gotten away with it because I never suspected a thing. I would have gone on being the happy idiot, thinking my wife was faithful. Well, you filthy cheat. How many other men have you slept with during our marriage that I don't know about? "I swear," she sobbed. "I swear to God, he's the only one. Why won't you believe me?" Sarah clutched her stomach and doubled over, like she was going to throw up. "I never thought I'd say this, but my mother was right about you. She hated you from the first moment she met you. Remember that day, 3 months after prom, when you came over to tell me you missed your period? Mom said you did it on purpose to trap me. But even though she couldn't stand you, she opened her house to us. I can't tell you how many times she slipped me a few dollars because she knew I was broke. She always made me promise not to tell you she paid for the baby formula. And when I became a pilot flying those early morning routes, who do you think watched our sons so you could go to college? I always wanted to prove Mom wrong. It made me sick to see her treat you like an outsider while fawning over my brother's wives. I always stuck up for you because we were a team. We were one. When you became a professor, I was so proud. That was the first time I saw her look genuinely proud of anything you did. Now, I thank God she's not alive to see you destroy us." Sarah screamed, "Oh God, why?" Then went silent. "You know my dad died when I was just a kid. One night, when I was about 15, I asked Mom why she still wore her wedding rings. Before she could answer, I said something stupid like a teenage boy would. 'Mom, you don't look that old. You should go out.' She smiled, took my hands in hers and said, 'I can't do that because I'm married. We swore before God and everyone we knew to be faithful. Just because Dad's gone doesn't change that. Your father lives in my heart as much as when he lived in our home, and someday we'll be together again.' I told her I didn't understand. She just smiled and said she'd pray that someday I would. Took me a long time to get it, to understand how deep their love was, how their promise went beyond death. I never told you this, but on my first flight, a flight attendant asked me to have a drink with her on our layover. She was stunning, and for a second I was tempted. But then I thought of my mom, showed her my wedding ring and said, 'I can't do that because I'm married.' I can't even count how many times I turned down similar offers. Word got around pretty fast that I was completely devoted to my wife. I wore that like a badge of honor. I let out a long, shaky breath. I've never seen a more perfect love than my parents had. I used to think we were getting there, and now you've destroyed us. All I have left for you is hatred." Sarah finally stopped crying enough to say, "Please, I'll do anything to make it up to you. Anything." "Okay," I said, my voice flat. "Just go back in time. Go back to when that piece of trash started trying to seduce you. I want you to change history. I want you to tell him to get lost because you're happily married. I want you to tell him your husband has the best job in the world and treats you like a queen. I want you to tell him to go home to his pregnant wife. I want you to tell him that if he ever talks to you again, your husband will cut off his balls. Can you do that? Sarah dropped to her knees, wailing. She shook her head, sobbing. No, I can't. I didn't think so. Please forgive me. Please. I'm leaving, I said, standing up. I don't know where I'm going, but I have to get away from you. Sarah lunged at me, grabbing my ankle. No, please, please, she begged. Let go of me, or I'll break your arm off and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. She released her grip, and I turned and walked towards the door. As it opened, she screamed, I wish he had killed me too. She must have read my mind. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.